There's a big issue that has rocked headlines in the country on our fraught relationship with Canada. The North American country, under Justin Trudeau, has become a dangerous safe haven for Khalistani separatist sentiment, and last month saw escalation in the diplomatic standoff leading to mutual expulsions of top diplomats from Ottawa and New Delhi. Such is the obsession of Canadian deep state, perhaps, in protecting these anti-India elements, that it is willing to make Canada and its citizens pay a heavy price in terms of crime, law and order disruption, and major drug activity that can ruin the Canadian youth. This week, on October 31, in fact, Canadian law enforcement agencies took down what is being billed as the biggest drugs manufacturing lab in Canada that was producing stuff like fentanyl and methamphetamine to a scale that could kill entire population of the country twice over. And guess what? Who the person behind the drugs super lab was found to be. One identified as Gaganpreet Singh Randhawa, who's now under arrest. He has been charged with multiple counts of drugs-related crimes in Canada, and agencies reported that they have already spent over $1 million, perhaps, in dollars to clean up the place of last traces of drugs and their precursors. It's not possible that this scale of drugs activity was happening without some protection. It is not possible that the deep state, which quickly found role of Lawrence Bishnoi gang in some gun crimes in Canada, did not know this huge scale of anti-society activity happening right under their nose. At the very least, this shows sheer incompetence of the same agencies that have been supplying allegation material, not evidence material, to the discredited leaders like Justin Trudeau. I'm being joined in by Kirk Lubimov, a political commentator, and Professor Andrew Latham, author and commentator, both joining us live from Canada. And a very good evening to you from here, a very good morning there. I would want to begin with Kirk. I saw a post by you in which you have mentioned about these federal investigators taking down this huge, very large, sophisticated lab that was producing stuff like fentanyl, etc. What's your sense, Kirk? Do you think this happened on the watch? How could this happen, this huge scale of drugs-related activity and nobody noticing it?
Yeah, it's. That's the $1 million question, or a life-saving question for Canada. We have a serious issues here, and it's. If we just step back a little bit, this is one of only a few drug busts happened just this week that has ties to crossing over our border. We had a drug shipment that was stopped at the border in Ontario with in a grapes containers. We had just a family with a 61-year-old grandma arrested with drugs and weapon smuggling charges. And this drug bust is just an incredible example of how easy it is to bring stuff over the border and the size of operations that we have in Canada. The fact that nobody really clued into it before, and how did we get to arresting only one person is such an interesting question here. As you said before, the drug bust here had the potential to make over 90 million doses of lethal fentanyl doses there's enough there to kill every Canadian over 2.5 times, which is just incredible. So, and one of the interesting things about this discovery of the different chemical compositions that's in that lab was that it had the same signatures to make drugs as the cartels down in Mexico and Southern America do. So it's an obviously international drug ring that has connections to right down into the drug cartel. And so the question is here, what is actually happening here? We know we have a broken border system. We know it's easy to get stuff into Canada. A third of our trucking industry is black market now. People at the shipping yards have been raising the alarm of how easy it is to operate. We even have record amounts of stolen cars moving in and out of Canada. So we have really serious broken infrastructure and defense system within Canada that's making drugs and weapon smuggling very lucrative. We need to point out that part of this drug bust was also 89 handguns and machine guns that were caught as well, and explosives. So it's extremely alarming to what is happening here.
Kirk, do we have any more details of who this main suspect, Gaganpreet Randhawa, is? He's in custody. He's been in custody for about a week now, or at least a few days. Do we have any more details whether there are any crime syndicate connections for this main suspect?
We don't have too much any other hard evidence. This individual, it seems like, has been arrested before on some similar charges, which is, again, raising the alarm of why he's even walking around free. This location, actually, of where this main bust, so this was one of 3 busts connected to the same operation. And this main bust where most of the drugs were, and weapons and everything, in this exact same location about 10 years ago, before it was an illegal weed operation there as well, before they legalized it in Canada. So the location was really well known to everyone.
Yeah, I mean, and Kirk, after going through your post, I also looked for and found some reports on this particular operation by your federal investigators. And interesting that it's not just drugs. So you see, apart from those drugs and the precursors, investigators also seized a total of 89 firearms, which included 45 handguns, 21 assault rifle, AR-15 style assault rifles, and some machine guns. Imagine. And many of which were loaded and ready for use. These are Canadian media reports. I mean, this is huge, and this is a serious law enforcement issue. I mean, there is a reason why I'm delving in detail into this, because some of the crimes that have taken place in Canada, Kirk, and you know what I'm talking about, have been attributed to crime syndicates in India and to someone who's actually incarcerated in prison, who's in jail, who can't talk to people. I mean, what's really happening in Canada?
Yeah. Again, I just want to emphasize there was also explosive found there. So the situation is extremely alarming. It's, and the guns had silencers as well. So this is a full-blown operation, a full-blown crime operation. Listen, India has been warning us of what's happening, or the people who were brought into Canada. They even warned us of suspected terrorists that did smuggling drugs and weapons into India, who is working for Canada Border Service Agency. So we have some serious holes to plug, which is, it's extremely alarming. There's no way this amount of drugs, money, chemicals, weapons can come into Canada without someone working in cahoots with the organization. It's hard to think otherwise. So we have a full-blown organizations here across Canada, and and India has been warning us. They've been pointing out the people, and we need to start taking that seriously and working with our partners instead of blaming someone else for it.
Let me take this to Professor Latham now. Professor Latham, are there going to be any political costs given the scale of this criminal activity that has been unearthed? I mean, Kirk says, and which is true, that India has been warning through its interlocutors to Canada and the Canadian authorities that you are unfortunately becoming a safe haven for criminal gangs which are causing harm to India, but ultimately they might come to harm you as well, which seems to be happening, Professor Latham.
Yes. Well, there's a parallel to Occam's razor, which is called Hanlon's razor. Never ascribe to evil what can be explained by sheer and utter incompetence. And I think that's largely what's going on in Canada at the moment, not just in respect of border security, which has failed in a dramatic way. But Canada, in some ways, is facing so many crises in terms of productivity, in terms of crime and education and access to health care, that I think this particular issue is of a piece with a broader failure of the Canadian state, which, though, it has to be said, is amplified by the Justin Trudeau government, which is not inclined these days to listen to the Indian government when it advises about this drug gang or this connection to the cartel, because it is obsessed for some legitimate reasons having to do with freedom of speech in Canada, but also electoral reasons that the Liberal Party is beholden to various diasporic communities, one of which is the Punjabi, the Sikh community, especially around Vancouver and in my hometown, Toronto, and is therefore inclined to turn a blind eye to some of these activities because they don't want to alienate those constituencies. So I think it's a both-and situation. On the one hand, sheer and utter and growing incompetence and state failure, if I can put it that way.
Right.
And on the other hand, there's an electoral dimension to it as well.
Yeah, continue, Professor Latham. Just adding to my thoughts to what you're saying. Forget about Indian diaspora for a while. Forget about just the liberal core constituency for a while. Does the larger Canadian population, the people of Canada, so the citizens, people who have to live there forever, do they see this as a serious issue?
Yes. This amongst several others. So the Trudeau government is the least popular government since people have been doing surveys around these things in the whole history of Canada. The Conservatives, it's a complex political situation right now, but the Conservatives under Pierre Poilievre are leading in the polls by 20, 30%. I mean, if there were an election today or tomorrow, the Trudeau government would be out. Because, to answer your question directly, the Canadian people are utterly disaffected. They are accustomed to having very few handguns on the streets. They are accustomed to not facing this kind of drugs crisis. They are accustomed to not having to deal with potentially friendly governments in China and India being in a very hostile relationship now with Canada. And I could go on and on and on. There are so many reasons why Canadians are disaffected. It's showing up in the polls. And as I said, if there were an election today, the Trudeau Liberals would be out across the country. How do I know this? Recently, there have been two by-elections in Canada, one in Toronto, in a seat that has been a Liberal seat forever. They lost it. And one in Montreal, not too far from Pierre Trudeau's, slip of the tongue, Justin Trudeau's constituency that they've held forever, that they also lost. And those are just harbingers of things to come. They lost those seats because Canadians are utterly disaffected.
Yeah. And I was going through a press release, Kirk, of the RCMP, and they have mentioned there that the agencies have spent about $500,000 by then, possibly more now, on cleaning up the place. And they're writing, interestingly, that this is Canadian taxpayer money. So the citizens of Canada are paying for these failures of the present government. Perhaps my question, how soon we are going to see some consequences, political consequences for these failures coming in?
Yeah, this is an interesting question because British Columbia, where this drug bust happened, just had an election, and provincially they just voted in a government that probably is the weakest, least caring for crime, which is the David Eby NDP government. So it seems to be that there is still tolerance for living in such society, which is really a mind-boggling situation in British Columbia, considering overdoses rampant. It's the number one killer of people. Drugs is the number one killer of people below the age of 40, even below the age of 55. So these drug smuggling operations are directly the leading cause of deaths in many Canadians, many places. So. And yet we still support leaders who do not really do much about it. And that's including, the secondary situations here is, the costs in our healthcare, the costs in our law enforcement, and the rampant money laundering in our real estate, which is, there's plenty of reports done in British Columbia of how many millions a day getting laundered just through the casinos there. So, and that impacts everyday Canadians. And yet, at the local level, there still seems to be quite a bit of tolerance by Canadians. This is an issue that too many people are sleeping on.
It's surprising what you say, Kirk, but I just hope and wish that in the interests of the Canadian citizens themselves and the people would understand that there are costs coming in of that indulgence which you are talking about, this tolerance you are talking about, and hopefully that would change. Godspeed to you both and to the people of Canada. On that note, thank you so much, Kirk and Professor Latham, for joining us. Short break news and live news continues on the other side. And of course, at 8 p.m. tomorrow, Super Primetime Max, Arnab Goswami is back with the debate.